Gentlemen, do you have any questions about kind of 25 minutes? Okay. All right, anytime you all are ready, we can kick it off. Thanks to everyone who's here this morning. Welcome.
Yeah, we'd also like to extend the thanks.
So, it's a pleasure to be here and present our Capstone project. So, my name is Ruben Ferreira, this is Michael McKean. So, we work in this semester in this Capstone project that was really helpful and learning for us. So, the opportunity that we saw before we started in the last semester was create an app to provide recommendations about restaurants. I remember to see this in Facebook. Was a friend asking for recommendation, and we were thinking that someone can ask recommendation of a restaurant, but the people that is giving recommendation didn't know anything about him, about what are things that they like. So when we started to talk about this, and it was a team that was working with our research, we decided to work with this because we saw that was a really wonderful opportunity to learn and use machine learning at the same time that we was creating an app and provide recommendation about restaurants. When we start to think we will be the scope of our project on the Capstone, we decide to focus in the group-based restaurant recommendations. So you can find a lot of space where you can find recommendation about restaurants, but we try to focus in go with, we call a party with friends and provide a recommendation that will be good for any of this group. And the second opportunity that we tried to accomplish was working with this research team. They was working with trying to learn and research about how people want to provide information, share information, personal information, if we try to give a benefit of this provide this user or personal information. So the difference between feedback and feed-forward research is that when people is trying to receive a result of provide information to us, and we can show that the result of this recommendation will be better because they are sharing information with us. So our solution is using machine learning and machine learning model to provide this recommendation, and we are using technology that is a hybrid web application that Michael will talk now.
So our front end is built out using the Ionic framework, and Ionic has plugins wrapped around an Angular package. So essentially we built it in Angular, and Ionic enabled us to connect it across different mobile device platforms. The commands to do so are as simple as Ionic add iOS or Ionic add Android. For the scope of this project, we didn't necessarily intend to branch out and have it hosted on all of those different devices. However, it is in a position being wrapped within the Ionic framework to do so. As our backend, we created a Node.js server to help protect a lot of our API keys and database passwords so that wasn't available on the client side. And both the Ionic app and the Node server communicate with several different APIs to help facilitate the whole group recommendation process, including a Google Maps and Places API. Probably the biggest one is our machine learning app. We have data stored in both Microsoft SQL Server and Firebase, with Microsoft SQL Server hosting all of the data for the machine learning model itself. It is the most integrated way to work with Azure ML. And Firebase provides certain protections and bootstrapped authentication that we decided would be good for personal user information, including emails, passwords, names, etc. And that's basically what we worked with throughout. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into our machine learning model, which when we entered the semester, we didn't anticipate it being as big of a portion of our project as it actually was.
just in the beginning of our project, we start to figure out that, okay, we were working with a different team, and we were not able to wait them to give us the final model to work with. So we start to work with our app, and we figure out that, okay, we need to be ready to change the model anytime throughout the semester. So we was able to do that. But this is the normal model that machine learning. We are using Matchbox Recommender. The best example is Netflix. If you think Netflix is giving recommendation about next movie that you can see because you have information about the movie that or the series that you like before that. So it's the same Matchbox Recommender. So this is the normal one when you have a user that provides information. In our cases, the user give us a different restaurant and provide feedback. The research team provide us a survey that was with a lot of information, so we have a data set. We start to work and create this first model. And when you train the model predict, and we are able to have a web service where our app can only need to pass a user, and the web service and give us the recommendation of the restaurant for this particular user. So the choosing that this model needs the user, restaurant, and feedback about this restaurant, but about talking about this research and the thing that we are doing with the research team, we are providing user different feedback, user features that provide better information, and we can be able to provide better recommendation for the user. So we in the middle of the semester we work talking with these teams of research. This research team, we figure out that we need to be sure that the user provide us some feedback before, because if the model has no feedback about the user, this model was not working. So this is the first model that I was showing, the normal model, but we need to create a new model for, we call old users or new users, where the users did not provide us any feedback about restaurant before. So the new model only receive from the users the different features that the users can provide us, and once that the user give us more information, more personal information, we can say to the user, okay, yes, because you give us more information, we can provide you a better recommendation. The second problem that we saw in this in the first model, that if the user change some features, and we want to say to the user, okay, you provide us more information about you, we are giving a better recommendation for you. So we need to be sure that we are giving a better recommendation because the user is providing information about him or her. So this model, Azure Machine Learning did not create a way to train the model all the time automatically without be asked training the model. So we decided to do this once a day. So each 24 hours we are training the normal model. So if the user changed the features in the last 24 hours, we need to create in the database a track about when was the last time the user changed the feedback, and if the user changes their information in the last 24 hours, we are using the second model to be sure that we are providing the best recommendation for each user.
Are there any questions so far about the machine learning model or any other in general?
So how expensive is it to retrain the model?
It's free. It just takes, as far as time cost, it can be upwards of a minute.
Yes, it's like it's a minute that you
for the entire data set.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay.
It's not so long.
I'd probably kick down your threshold a little bit.
Maybe in the future when we will have more information, probably take more time.
Yeah.
But it's
For sure.
It's the difference between the time and be sure that we are using because that is what we're saying to the user. We're saying to the user, okay, if you provide information, we can give us a better recommendation.
Yeah.
So we want to be sure that if we have the information training the old model, we can use that model. But if we have additional information, we are using a different model to be sure that we are saying to the user, okay, this is a better recommendation because you give us better information.
Sure.
And there's low costs for us to be conservative because as a user, you're typically not going to be searching out 5 or 6 recommendations a day.
Yeah.
So we put it at 1 day.
Yep.
As
Yeah, if you scale this, you might consider setting up some sort of threshold that triggers, when the user opens the app or something like that, kicks off their, recalculation, and you may be able to partition, I don't know the details of your algorithm, may be able to partition the model training per user, so you're not having to retrain everything.
Yeah. And this allows us to work with database and work with the connection with the database and be sure that we have all the information updated in the database with the correct time when the user give us the information to be sure that we're using the last information from the user.
Yeah. Thanks.
If there are no further questions, we'll move forward with a little bit of a demo of what we have on the web app.
Yeah, just one question.
Yeah.
Meaning of the term matchbox?
Matchbox, the term is the term that I use Azure Machine Learning to say, okay, I provided not only once but more recommendations. We can decide if we want to 3 restaurants, 5 restaurants, 10 restaurants. In the model, in the demo that we will see now, we decide to ask to machine learning to give us 10 restaurants, so we are be able to find between these 10 restaurants if they are in the group restaurants that are similar to different users. So if we're using this for only one user as Netflix, we probably decide 3 restaurants, something like that. But in the middle of the semester, we decide to ask to the machine learning give us 10 different recommendations, so we can be sure that is the same restaurant is for one user and for the other user that's in the group, in the party that we are creating.
So you're actually comparing individuals' recommendations to create like a shared recommendation. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Essentially,
So, and you will see in the model that we have different ideas of what do you want as a user, if you want that to be sure that it's good for any of these people in the group, or you are thinking that you're lucky and we can decide which is better for all of you.
Okay.
So this right here is the landing page of our app. One key thing to note, we're going to start off with getting a recommendation right off the bat. In our communication with others about this idea, it was a resounding yes, we don't want to have to provide information or sign up in order to use it. And that goes back to the research idea of feed forward versus feedback. If users don't have any incentive to disclose information, they're a lot less likely to. And the switching cost is pretty high as opposed to a Google Maps or a Yelp or whatever. And so in this case, we do provide a generalized recommendation for users, much like Netflix will provide you their recommendations if you just started an account and have no viewing history. So if we move forward with receiving a recommendation, it's currently hitting the model, comes back, and these are 5 restaurants that our machine learning model deems good restaurants to try out. And so currently, you can see we have 5, we can select details, but there's not much more we can do besides that without having signed in. Simply because if you haven't signed in, there's really no purpose to ask for feedback or to elaborate anymore, and it is a glorified search engine. However, if we do retrack and sign in, I've already created an account for myself. We can see now we can add friends to the party. And so this is kind of the big differentiating point of the app, is to be able to go as a group and receive recommendations for everyone, deciding that age-old question, hey, where should we go, and settle any disputes.
Is that your real email address?
No. I wish, that would be a really nice nice thing, but let's see. I want to go to lunch with Ruben. I'll go with Dr. Anderson, and let's here, if we notice, there are 2 choices, and that, again, we'll step back a little bit and talk about when we were discussing the idea with people. They also said they don't want kind of the same recommendation every time, which makes sense. So we provided different alternatives for those. Top choice is equivalent in a way to the I'm feeling lucky button that used to be on Google, where it essentially will give you kind of a #1 choice, regardless of who's in the party, just taking if Ruben really likes a restaurant, Dr. Anderson really likes a restaurant, but I don't. Those two yeses are going to be highly weighted, and so that will still show up even though I may not like it. On the other hand, popular choice provides recommendations that only all of us can agree on. It's more of a consensus choice. So because I'm really picky and stubborn, we're going to go with popular choice because I don't want to go somewhere where other people do. And once this finishes loading for us, we can see that we have some different recommendations for us. I believe that we all like these restaurants. I don't know about you guys, but since I think that these are all great choices, I'm going to defer to Dr. Anderson. Which one would you like to go to?
Cheesecake Factory.
Oh, no.
Very solid choice. And so
Blood sugar spike just hearing that.
I'm very excited about
I'm
this.
just ordering a salad. Hoping to absorb the goodness of
The aroma.
cheesecake pie osmosis.
So one of our future steps is to be able to better integrate the Google Places API. Currently, we don't have it natively wrapped, simply because we've run into issues with the specific locations. If you think about it, there are probably dozens or hundreds of cheesecake factories around the world. I don't know how localized it is. It's definitely that way for McDonald's, for example. And so if we went to one McDonald's that's here over on Bulldog and University, the rating might be different than a McDonald's that's in China. And so these specific attributes of Cheesecake Factory is a Cheesecake Factory class and not an instance, if that speaks to the tech people. Essentially, it's talking about Cheesecake Factory in general. Because of that distinction, we haven't been able to integrate specific locations. This will, for example, take us to Cheesecake Factory in
Abu Dhabi, nice.
So, it's a little bit
Put it
far
on the
away.
list.
Might sway the decision, but let's say that we do
I'll be there next month.
One part of the application that we couldn't really show in this demo is the time between receiving the recommendation, going to the restaurant, enjoying it, coming back, and providing a rating. So
So-
we shortcutted that and essentially saying, okay, we've been there, assuming that we liked it, how would I personally rate this? And this rating, I really enjoyed it. Great experience, the trip and the food. This specific rating is going to go into our Matchbox table and essentially say someone with my similar attributes, according to my features, likes Cheesecake Factory. So in the future, if I or someone like me wants a recommendation, Cheesecake Factory is more likely to show up, as opposed to something that I may rate 1 star and then it goes down.
So a couple questions at this stage. Appreciate that the ratings for Cheesecake Factory are applied to class. I didn't understand why that restricted you from showing, that restaurant associated or nearest to your current GPS location or something like that.
So each instance of a Google Place has its own unique ID.
Yeah.
And that's when we initially hit our Google Places API, that's what we were hitting.
Yeah.
But we were localizing it to Provo until the research team provided a new survey that was more generalized, and that ended up kind of picking the top results of locations across the world. So in a sense, providing the specific location on a Google map, you need the specific ID or a location to search file.
Okay.
So those are kind of the extra steps that we didn't scope for.
Yeah. So there's probably a different endpoint where you can still keep your rating class oriented, but search for Cheesecake Factory in Provo, Utah because it's closest to us.
And in the future, we imagine that users' ratings will eventually supplement, because that's currently the Google Place rating.
Yeah.
That's filling that in.
Yeah.
In the future, we imagine user ratings will likely be able to populate that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So, go ahead.
Sure, so you said that it's gonna, now help to recommend other folks, other folks that have attributes similar to yours. Are the attributes anything beyond just what you've rated?
Yes, and that is more on the research side of things, but we've integrated in order to enable it for, I think the bulk of the research is happening in the fall semester. But let's take a quick look at my profile. We've deemed it a survey, and that essentially has all of my features. So there are 27 different attributes that are used to help train the machine learning model. And these attributes are typical research fashion, somewhat atypical. So you can see in which states that you reside in, this might make sense. As we move forward with these, you start to see, okay, am I happy? How is that going to affect my rating? Do other people's circumstances prevent me from doing what I do? So the idea behind the research, twofold: feedback, feed forward, the distinction between those, as well as seeing if there are ways to recommend restaurants, as in recommending IS groups or other recommendations based on personality features. As you can see, a couple of these are null. We have enabled it to be a null value so that you do not need to complete the survey in its entirety. Again, the idea of feedback, feed forward, we don't want everyone to need to sign on completely at the beginning in order to use it.
And the machine learning allows you to know which are the most important user features that you need. So the survey, the original survey has like 70 questions, was 70. And we will figure out that this was the most important for the machine learning. And machine learning can work with, if you answer only 5, 6, 7, or 27 is still working. And that's the final question that we have in the survey.
Tell me about your rating again. You rated Cheesecake Factory 5 stars. Is that an individual rating?
Yes.
Is it a group? My perception of the group rating, and
No, it's individual, and when we create the event in the future, we can send a notification to anyone of the participants in this party to say, okay, you went to this specific place, please give us feedback, and we will receive not the user that created the party, but feedback from anyone of them.
Yeah, I do think that the experience, the instance of me going to a specific restaurant at a particular time with a group of people influences very heavily that rating. It'd be cool to push the boundaries and get even more specific, but thanks.
And then the individual rating also gives you autonomy to, if you were frustrated with a certain recommendation and didn't really like it, you can say, hey, I don't like that at all, and in the future, with groups that you go with, that will influence it.
Yeah.
So if we have time afterward, we do have a demo that can involve creating an account for anyone here, and that only involves providing a real or fake email, real or fake names. We haven't added any verification yet. And then you can add friends that are currently on the database and work with that. We're reaching sort of a time limit, so we'll proceed for the moment, but if we have time afterward, we can do that.
One more question on kind of the scale of those 5 stars. So I can imagine, going to a $1 sign restaurant and thinking, this is the best $1 sign restaurant I've ever been at.
Yeah.
But it's nowhere near the best $5 sign restaurant I've ever been at. And is that category taken into account, or is it just you give this thing a 1 through 5?
So not presently. Again, in the future, we have an idea of identifying specifics to a group recommendation. Say you don't want to spend money on a $4 sign restaurant, right? Your group, you want a $1 sign. So in the future, we're looking to add a form before you click top choice to say, this is our price range. You can also say, we only want the top-notch recommendations. We only want 5-star recommendations. That makes sense. So currently, that doesn't factor in because a lot of the evaluation happens in the black box of Matchbox recommended. So we don't have specifics on that, but we do know that it takes into consideration the different variables, including the rating, in order to provide those recommendations. Does that make sense?
It does. I would just like to have, I'd like to have more space to make my recommendation for a $1 sign restaurant, because if it's all on the same scale, every time I go to a $1 sign restaurant, it's going to be 1 or 2 stars. If I'm thinking, oh, I gotta save my 5 stars for Commander's Palace in New Orleans or something.
That makes sense.
Anyway,
I just added that one to my list, by the way.
So we hadn't considered that very enough before, but that's definitely great feedback that we appreciate. Yeah, Ben?
No, they're fine.
Yeah, there'll be time for questions after if they come. But yeah, so wrapping up in the end, some of the big lessons we learned working with the research team, we had to build in some modularity and flexibility to our development process. As Ruben mentioned when we started, it was kind of an idea that we had a model that the research team would help us develop by the first month, and then we could spend the rest of the time building out the application. As things progressed more slowly with gathering new data, we weren't able to develop that model so early on. And we were able to, in an agile manner, change our development process in order to accommodate changing models, which for the future, if we do need to create a model that can improve it, it's a simple pull out and plug in with new API destinations.
So the research team is still working and try to figure out what is the best thing for this research that they are working on. And we say, okay, we can change the model anytime that you want, because we prefer or have to be sure that we can improve the model anytime that we need it.
Yeah. And then in summation, we learned a lot about web development, back-end, front-end integration, APIs, and machine learning. Moving forward, some of the big aspects that we have in mind are these outing events or group events where essentially there's an instance of you going with your friends to a specific restaurant. And there's a lot of work that you can do with that, including for the user, seeing a history of where you've been, who you've been with, and for the developers being able to run either data analytics on it or improve recommendations based on specific instances of those classes, as well as other changes that we mentioned, further integrating Google Places, and hopefully deploying it before too long.
And I think that the work that we did with the connection between the app and the REST API, and the connection between the REST API and the different databases and the machine learning thing was one of the bigger lessons we have in all this.
So that is what we've been working on over the past 4 months. Do we have any further questions?
Well, in a minute. Ben had a question.
I was just gonna make a comment. A lot of times I do like a cost to taste ratio, and that's where I would do just star value. So
Totally with you.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily based upon what the dollar amount is, rather how the cost is to the taste.
So is yours already embedded in that 5-star
Mine
rating?
would be already embedded in that 5-star.
And we were showing the price in the restaurant just before you click the tab. The dollar sign is like a category of price. It was from 1 to 3, I think, 1, 4. So we are showing the type of price of the restaurant.
But keep in mind, Ben's favorite restaurant is Skippers. So.
Right, but if I understand
Long John Silver.
if I understand the model right, the way it's currently processed, then if I give a 5 to a $1 sign restaurant, that's going to be a 5, and weighted the same as a 5 for any other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a 5. And now it's 5.
Yeah. So
Are you able to re-rate the same restaurant? So if you go to the Cheesecake Factory and one time it's a 5, the next time you go it's just horrible, and you say, how much is it 2?
Yes. Yes, we can do that.
Does it update and just say,
Yes.
geez, you went from 5
Remember
to
that
2?
now if you are giving feedback about the restaurant in any place, in the future we hope to have the location for each place. But yes, you can, once you give feedback, the connection, the REST API is checking if you give us feedback before changing your feedback, or if it's a new feedback is adding a new row to the database. And yes, we have that trigger created in the database to check if you give us feedback before or after that.
Does this only have chains, or are you able to also bring in like hole-in-the-wall restaurants that?
So our current data set does only contain chains that were listed of the 127 most popular
Yes, in the United
in
States.
the United States.
Yes, we did that.
So in the future, we do hope to be able to encourage either user submission or some other way to add new restaurants, including holes in the wall and local favorites to our restaurant database.
Because for machine learning, it's really important to have an initial data set to start to work, to be able to create a training model. And after that, you start to give more information, and you can add more restaurants and give more feedback about that.
So your model, when you're going through like the, hey, help us learn more about you, is a huge 27-question survey, and it seemed more like a psych evaluation. Is that specifically because of the research that's going on? Like that, I was just a little confused at that point. So is there research on the side of what's being done with the app, or is that research used specifically for the app recommendation, like machine learning?
So they're kind of Siamese twins in the sense that they're two living things, but they're very connected. so that those specific features are specific to the research, but they're also specific to our model.
Yeah, the model was the one
So-
better for the model.
So the research, maybe a better way to say it, is the research being used for stuff outside your app, or is it just being used for your app?
I think it's the overall idea of the research, and we can use, Dr. Keith is handling it, so
Yeah.
that's kind of, he has more insight on it. The basic idea is twofold. One, can you provide good recommendations based on these psych evaluation features? And two, how do we distinguish between feedback and feedforward? And the app is facilitating that.
All right, thanks, gentlemen. Good job. Okay, next up we have Quizmatics. Oh, thank you.
You can sit at the table.
Yeah, come on around.
Down, slowly.
Yeah.
Skip over that part.
Looks like everybody procrastinated their 4 presentation
Hey,
visits.
it's all right. I enjoy the crowd at the end of the process here. I just view it a little differently, John. You just are so excited after having seen so many great presentations, you just can't hold back from coming.
I'm sure that if we were to take a survey, that's exactly what would happen.
I am positive also. Such diligent students.
Nothing better.
Not at this time of the semester, anyway.
Sure, do we have class on Thursday?
You
No.
mentioned we have class one last time. I'm not sure.
On Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, yeah. Very last day. All right. Floor is yours.
How's it going, everyone? We're Quizmatics. My name's Greg. Got Misha and Ashton. We built a pretty cool little app here we want to show you. So there's been a lot of research in recent years. Sorry, someone's got a click. So there's been a lot of research about these. They're called audience response systems. So basically these are like live quizzes or polls that people take in classes. The specific study that we looked at is an aggregate study of a bunch of other studies, shows that using these within classrooms raises grades around 4 to 6%, which is pretty substantial. That's about whole grade stuff for the class. But irregardless, even with all these great performance boosts and greater recall and learning by the students, current market solutions are pretty limited. They're fairly clunky, and there's just not a lot of great options out there. So some of the current market exists. We've got iClickers, Top Hat, and Kahoot. Some of the big things with iClickers, you guys are all familiar with them. They're the little remotes that you guys have. They're expensive. There's not really any student review options. Just very little value add outside of just you're in the class, you press the button, and that's it. Top Hat's a little bit different. They start doing some mobile applications and some web applications and things like that. A little bit better, but clunky, kind of part of this big overall system made by some of the book publishers. Again, very expensive for students and just kind of a little top heavy, right? On the other end of the spectrum, we got Kahoot, right? It's free, kind of fun, exciting, but there's no classroom management options for a teacher if they want to administer these classes or these quizzes to their students.
So these aren't necessarily the only market leaders. There are several others, but that we felt like that pretty much encapsulated the offerings that are in the market right now. So we wanted to find a place within that market, not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but finding the biggest value add and at the cheapest price point for students. So for our project, we built Quizmatics. We have a web application and as well as a mobile application that's cross-platform. Some of the looks like our emojis didn't render UTF-8 or something, but we wanted it to be free for educators. Lots of, but there's several of those market leaders that offer free options for teachers and then pass the costs on to students. We wanted to follow that same model except keep that price low for students. So we wanted to charge $6 per class for the students, which undercuts iClicker, undercuts Top Hat, doesn't undercut Kahoot, but that's okay because it's free. And the core functionality we wanted to offer was the ability to take a live in-class quiz. That's really our main offering, hence the name Quizmatics. We also wanted the ability for students to be able to ask questions to this application during class. Again, focusing on that in-class experience. These other companies offer a lot of out-of-class tools as well, sort of like Learning Suite. You have assignments that you can take out of class, but we really wanted to focus on the in-class experience. We also, as part of our MVP, are offering a quiz score export so that you can export the scores from these quizzes and import them into whatever class management tool you're using. And another big part of our app is students' ability to review their quizzes. So, for example, with an iClicker, you have a piece of hardware that you're clicking a button on. You don't necessarily, unless you write down what you put as the answer, you can't really go back and see what you answered, so you can't really study according to those quizzes. So we wanted to offer that in our application. As far as the technology we're using, for the front end, the clients, our web app is using React.js, and our mobile cross-platform mobile application is using React Native. As far as the backend work, we're using Firebase for pretty much everything, for our user management, for our hosting, for any backend work that needs to be done, we're using Cloud Functions, the equivalent of Lambda for AWS. And for our data set, we're using Firestore. And for our development process, in terms of managing our different environments and deploying code and managing our code, we're using GitLab.
All right, so we want to do a demo, and we invite you to participate if you'd like. We've done this before with some of you here. We did it with the IS 110 class that we'll talk about later. We got 325 IS 110 students, and it went really well, and they figured it out. So if it doesn't work, I'll blame you guys this time. But really, so what you can go to this bit.ly URL or console.quizmatics.com will get you there. You can register with Google or a regular account. Our registration process is really lightweight. It's just gonna ask for a name and email.
Do you want to pull over so I can do it? I'll do it through the phone so I can follow along with you here.
During the demo, we're gonna have the iPhone app showing up here.
For this sign up process, if you're gonna follow along, I'm gonna do it through the browser, so it'll be the same experience for you. So I'm going to that bit.ly link.
I have it here too. Register.
So if you haven't logged in, it probably looks like this. So I'm gonna go ahead and register a new account. And at the bottom, you can sign up with your Google account if you want. I'm gonna go ahead and type in some information here. Here's a cool, sorry.
If you're ahead of him, the join code was graduate-now. You can just go ahead there. We marked this one as free, so you won't have to type in your credit card this time. Unless you want to. Yeah.
Does everyone know about this trick with Gmail, that if you do the plus sign, you could use your same Gmail? And it's a different account. I think that's so cool.
Lifesaver.
Okay, so I'm gonna register. This should take me to that join page.
Graduate-now. It'll handle it either way.
Graduate-now. I'm gonna join this class. Enter student ID. You don't have to put your actual net ID.
Yeah, that was one thing we have here. When you configure a class, we let the teacher say, hey, do you want them to enter their email or their net ID or their numeric student ID? They can put that in there.
That's perfect.
And you'll also see that even though we have the iPhone app, the website is pretty mobile friendly as well, responsive. Okay, so he's registered. You should see this quiz show up as available. He's gonna switch over to the app now. I'm gonna show you a little bit how this quiz building process works. And then we'll take it together. Well, if I edit it, then they'll see the answers. So we can create a new one. So,
Come on, show us the answer.
no, that'll spoil it.
So while he's doing that, you'll notice over in the app we have real-time updates happening. This is all powered by Firebase. Automatically with that tool, you get real-time updates.
So we have multiple choice questions here and fill in the blank. What's gonna happen here? So let's see, what is the answer? Let's type in some numbers here. And then you mark the correct answer for a multiple choice. We have our copy and our delete buttons here. I'll add in a fill in the blank question as well. You can add more options. You can drag to reorder. It's a little tricky. We could do better on that UI, but drag to reorder. It's set up to automatically divide all the questions by that total at the top, so that that's taken care of. And that's a little bit about the editing process. That's how we build these quizzes. Yeah. So let's go back. I'll save this just so that it's there. Now I'm gonna deploy this trivia quiz so that we can take it together. You can see it lit up on the app. You should see that it's in the process of deploying now on yours. You can't see it yet because I haven't opened it. Just to go over this page for the teachers, they can select if they only want to show the question on this screen. That would require everyone to be in the classroom. So that's kind of a way of checking attendance. They can select if they want to use a timer or not and adjust the default time. So we're going to leave this as is right now so that you'll see the questions on your screen and we'll use a timer. That's not good.
Well, you left it on to only show it on this screen, right? So it went on search.
No,
No.
It was flipped off. It was toggle off. It may be because we deleted your response before. It could have something with that. All right, we were messing with it right before, so we're going to. Oh. All right. We get the web app view. Sorry about that. Yeah, we just took the quiz once before.
Can we create a new quiz? Let's just create a new quiz.
All right, we'll take the other quiz. Sorry about this.
You like the film?
Yeah. Hey, got it right. At least.
Actually,
maybe we
let's
take
take
the other one.
let's take this one and then we'll go back to the app.
I got 2.5 out of 10.
We just want to show off our app. That's awesome. It's not working.
Let's take this one first. Okay. So you're all seeing this. You select your answer. You had a little bit of time to look at it, so we won't wait the whole timer. I can close the question earlier. I can say don't use the timer. I'm going to close the question about 10 seconds if you want to submit your answers. All right. Now I can show the answer, and I'll show the stats as well. And it looks like the answer is Fillmore, and most of you got that right. But 84% correct, so good job. Let's go to the next question. What is the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world?
Damascus.
It's Greece City.
Yeah, sure.
I think it actually is a city in Syria.
Oh, really?
Helping a kid with a research paper.
All right, we don't need the whole time here, so finish up in about 5 seconds. I'm gonna close this. I will show the answer. It is Istanbul.
Not Constantinople?
Does that constitute a new city?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
you guys are pretty
Thank you.
good
They
at
might be
this. I have a
Jones.
feeling you might be Googling the answers. All right, what is the mascot of Hufflepuff? We're not case sensitive, so don't worry about that. We'll wait till it says a minute left and close it.
So right now you're showing these one at a time. Do you have the option of taking the entire quiz first and then?
That flow wasn't really a priority for us because every learning management system has a quiz that goes from beginning to end. And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, I'd rather use the one that's in Canvas or the one that's in Learning Suite.
Yeah.
Just because it's all there.
Can you go back and review kind of
Yes.
stats and stuff so the instructor wouldn't have to show the stats just at that time, but they could
Yep, we'll
go through everything and then
as
come
well as
back
the
and review?
students do.
Got it.
Alright, so we'll close this. Let's see, show answer.
A badger.
Honey badger knows what works.
Wow, 8 of you.
Yeah.
Someone on the end.
Yeah, honey badger don't care.
That's close enough. I should have put that. And actually, we could say after the quiz, we have functionality to say, you know what, that's pretty close to a badger. So we could enter that in the quiz's options and click regrade, and it would take care of that. So
Nice.
we're pretty proud of that feature. And this is the last question. In what year was the iPhone first released? I missed a D at the end of there.
You all were in my 401 class. I know this was a trivia question. Except Matt. You're excused from that and my rest. The trophy of superiority.
That's, I must be wrong.
Displayed proudly in my room.
Alright, we're gonna close this.
Actually put it on that dog chain.
So we're done with that. I'll mark it as allow review. And then let's just see if we can get this iPhone app one to work with. Oh yeah.
So now, I mean, they cleared out, we were messing with it, so we cleared out responses.
We manually manipulated data before this. It wasn't very smart on us, but if I were to show the other quiz, I think Misha could probably see it in the app here. Let's use a timer. Alright, never mind, we lied. Something's going on.
Was that a dancing badger?
It's a dinosaur.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about this, so student, after that quiz closed, now my closed quiz is that trivia quiz is there, and since Ashton opened it for review, I can go over the results and see what the results of that quiz in the app, and review what I put.
Yep. We also have functionality to adjust partial points or give free points for it. So you can treat those like a poll question and not affect people's grades. The other thing we wanted to show was the questions tab here. You can add a question. That way, you know, this is really, we wanted to focus on the large auditoriums with, you know, in that JSB auditorium, you have 700 students. You know, a lot of the teachers don't want to stop for questions for 700 different students, but at their convenience, they can go to the question queue, see what's going on, and answer the ones that they want to answer. That way, the student remembers their question as well too.
Is this tied to a specific class instance, or is this
yeah,
just
if you opened
overall?
a different class
Okay.
instance because we already had questions there.
Oh, I meant, sorry, is this like a particular day in class that these questions
You
are
can
tied
filter
to?
it by
It's
date.
just,
So
okay, yeah, perfect.
Then you can upvote the questions as well.
So it's not necessarily like a class period, it's for the entire class at any
Yeah.
point in time.
Yeah, but being able to see kind of today's
Yeah.
Yeah, we
versus
default to
this
today
week
'cause that's what
sometime
should be
earlier this week,
pertinent.
someone had a question, let me see what it was.
Yeah,
Exactly.
educators can tag in their responses, and then everyone can view those questions and see the responses as well.
So, and then lastly, like you were asking,
Can they upvote questions?
Mm-hmm.
we can go to the whole quiz analysis, and then we can skip through question by question again and see how people did.
And we can show that aggregated as well. I think the IS 110 class will work.
Yeah, so we, you know, this was a big one. I don't think this is a FERPA violation because they didn't really receive any real grades for this. They just got extra credit for
Blah,
participating.
blah, blah.
Never mind, it's a FERPA violation. Don't tell anyone. Where's the?
Awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed that. So as far as lessons learned, one of the most important ones was the power of using the right tool. So we all learned something new this semester with our capstone. Ashton and I had never worked with React before. I mean, we had like a week where we did it with our web dev class. Very, very light, didn't really know anything, but we were able to apply this tool, learn it, and build an application. Misha had never done React Native because they were able to build some applications, right? Nice thing about those tools is they allowed us to do some asynchronous calls. They allowed us to do these live quizzes. They were exactly the right tool that we needed for this kind of a kind of an application. And even though it took us, the first 2 weeks were kind of a learning curve, we were able to have our core functionality up in about, by iteration 2, right? We were able to build, post live quizzes and take live quizzes, iteration 2, like really early because we had the right tool. So that was a big lesson learned for us, just because, it's worth it to find the right tool, learn the right tool, and use the right tool for the problem, instead of just trying to adapt something that you know and something that feels comfortable. So that was really eye-opener for us, for me at least.
Along with learning these new technologies, we ran into this issue of deciding on what data structures to use with the NoSQL database. We all had to communicate with one another. We're going to model the data for a quiz like this. So in the mobile app, this is how you can handle it with that data structure. So that increased development time in certain cases because we had to communicate with one another and figure out how to best suit our need with that data structure. But probably the bigger challenge that increased development time was developing asynchronously. So making sure our system was reactive in terms of handling any errors. Obviously we didn't do well, you noticed in our demo. But it's important, and as we go to market with this product, we'll want to explore that even more, making sure that the user experience is seamless no matter what happens in our application.
The load test that we did was really beneficial for us. To be honest, we were really concerned about costs and load, and Firebase is supposed to handle all these things in scale, but we weren't sure what our costs were going to expand up to. And so we were really nervous about that. We put in a lot of work to make sure it would work well. First thing we learned was we went overboard on costs. We went overboard on lowering costs. We were expecting maybe we'd cost like $1 or $2 a student. That's why we need to charge at least around $6, cover some other things. We got through it and there was virtually no cost. We were looking at 1/2 cent a student for 30 class periods, an entire semester. So that was really sustainable to us. All of a sudden we learned we could give people free trials and it wouldn't really damage us too much to let them try that out for a semester. The other thing we learned is, how is the bandwidth going to handle this? Things worked well in the load test. We wanted to do some more testing afterwards. We went in Chrome. You can throttle your bandwidth in Chrome. We set it to 1 kilobyte per second and it functions perfectly fine because once you're in the quiz, it's just sending back a few bytes of data to tell you which question you're on. Just strings of data. So that was really lightweight and proved to us that this is sustainable.
Is that including the initial download of the app, or is that just kind of the transactions within it?
Just the transactions.
Okay.
In terms of next steps for the development process, we really want to make sure that we finish out that question functionality in the mobile app. It looks like we'll have to revisit some of the quiz functionality as well. In the mobile application, we wanted to focus on the core functionality, so we didn't put as much effort into the authentication flows, and that's kind of why we went through the mobile web app version. So in terms of signing up, managing your profile, all within the app. We also want to add the class management portion of the application within the app. And throughout this development process, we have a lot of old data that doesn't work with how we ended up building the system. So removing all of that in our prod environment, and then creating a stage environment for our data so we can act independent of our production environment as we go to market.
And as far as our last steps is go to market. First step is solidifying strategic partnerships. Ashton's been contacting a few teachers. I don't know if he wants to talk about that.
Yeah, we've contacted a few teachers that have all been impressed by this. I mean, we're talking about accounting, statistics, finance. The demo in IS 110 went well as well. And I think that we built a product. We put enough work into this that it would probably be a shame if we let it go. And so, and the teachers seem to feel that way as well. So we're hoping to get at least a class or 2 on board so that this can be a worthwhile venture going forward.
And just as far as next step, I mean, have to incorporate, get our marketing plan figured out, figure out our support structure, and everything that entails go to market outside of just building an application.
When can we invest?
We take
Right now.
Money order, Bitcoin.
Questions?
Why didn't you go after us? No, I'm just kidding. So I was interested, what kind of feedback have you received from the teachers? Has there been a all positive? Have they been like, yeah, we absolutely love this? Or is there certain functionalities that they're like, hey, this would be really good to have, or anything like that?
I can take that.
Yeah.
There was, well, be totally transparent, probably shouldn't go too far, but there's another professor in the Marriott School that's been working on something similar. We found out as we started contacting professors. But as we talked to that specific professor, he said, I wish I found you before. He's saying, you know, we might be able to work something out where he drops his projects, because this was built the right way. You know, other people are building things where you have to refresh, and, you know, just the framework and the scale and the flexibility. We feel like we have a lot of potential, and teachers have felt the same way. They've been very impressed with what we've done.
I learned exactly one thing in my marketing class when I was a student here that stuck with me, and that was don't ever compete on price unless you have a cost advantage. It seems like you're coming into this saying we're going to compete on price. Have you given thought to that? I mean, why did you set the price point at 6? We're thinking we got to cover, and now you're even saying maybe that's too high.
Yeah, that's our highest, and I think we could go lower. But to give you a reference point, Top Hat's about $24 a semester per class. iClicker has an app that's like $14 per semester, and that is just an app that turns your phone into a remote. You can't actually go and review things, and so half a cent per student, I think we can absolutely compete on cost and price. Especially, I think we have an advantage that we got a lot of work done for free because we had to for this capstone.
So that half a cost per student, is that just transactionally? Or is that the average of hosting entirely sets of databases with questions and students and teachers and all that?
We looked at the cost after our load test. Wasn't really like a true load test, but after we did that IS 110 demo, we just looked at the cost after that demo based on our reads, our writes to the database, how much data we have in the database, how much bandwidth is going on for the hosting, and just extrapolated that out.
Okay.
And that's how we came up with that number. It's possible that's actually a little higher, but it seems close.
I think, we overestimated, but to be honest, if we do charge, right now our largest fee would be credit card processing. And maybe that's a sign that we need to find some freemium model with ads or something, I don't know, but I mean, credit card processing will give us like 30 cents per student, so there is that to consider as well.
I definitely think a freemium model will grow your user base more rapidly, and you'll have teachers that try it out if it's a reasonable level of use. For instance, maybe like five quizzes during the semester or something like that is the freemium, and I'll get hooked and say, well, I should be doing this all the time. And you'll support, you know, a fair amount of free users, but the word spreads a lot quicker than your advertising dollars will spread.
Since you don't pay the $6, it's your students.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our favorite thing is you sell one person and then you can get a class of 600.
Yeah.
This whole education sales thing is great.
Some of us need to learn more about that.
Yeah, on the other side of it, not being the student. Yeah.
Gonna give any kickbacks to teachers?
No, we were thinking about kickbacks to students though. I mean, if you refer your student, I mean, we could easily give you like a $100 Amazon gift card if you refer your professor, and we would make out pretty well. So that's an option.
Yes, sir.
Got an idea. So have you put any thought into, so Firebase is awesome. NoSQL can be super powerful, especially for scaling. One of the major pain points is the changing of data structures, and you highlighted that. Have you put any thought into how you'll version your data structures going forward as you continue to implement additional features from version to version?
We haven't explored that specifically, but it's something we'll definitely face as we just create the staging environment for our data, because it's a separate, within Firebase you just have projects, so we have to bucket it in a project, and keeping those consistent will be tough. Just off the top of my head, I think we would go through some sort of documentation process, but in versioning the data itself, we haven't explored that much.
Yeah, you might consider, you know, understanding whatever your highest level object is, putting a versioning tag on there, and then you have logic in the code to pull certain attributes or not based on the versions. But man, it's tough. It's tough. Other questions or thoughts? Okay, great job. Okay, service folk. You guys totally have some.
Oh, thanks.
I signed up at 9.
Hey Ben, would you move that chair just to the side? So
here's our project. We want to present you something that looks good, so we're just going to present theirs again.
live streaming. Let me see if we have any followers today.
It's like 15.
That's right. Setting the records.
Signed into the stream or something.
Yeah, what are you using to live stream?
Just YouTube, and they have a variety of open source broadcasting tools that you use to actually do the streaming. You have 2 fans online right now.
So, are we good to go?
Good to go. Anytime you'd like.
You should probably stay. So, we are Service Folk. My name is Ben Nelson. We have John and Alex here as well. We're going to walk through kind of the problem and the agenda. We're going to go through the project overview, the infrastructure of our actual application. Then we're going to talk about each of the different persons or people that are going to be using our product. So the customer, the service tech, and the manager. We're going to talk about lessons learned and move on to our future steps. So let's talk about the project as a whole. The whole idea came from John. He has a contact with someone at Mad Dog Cycle who responded and said, hey, we have an issue with our service repair shop. Essentially, people and we are still using paper carbon copy stuff to give to our customers for recording the information that we have when we want to process a repair. And as John presented this idea, I used to be more into road biking than I am presently, but getting my bike repaired was a terrible, terrible process. I remember even going into REI and I would bring, which is a fairly established vendor or repair organization, and I would say, hey, I need this done, this done, and this done. They would write something down on a piece of paper, tape it to my bike, take it in the back, and then I was just like, cool, I'll pick it up when you call me, or like, there was zero process for any of that. And as John presented the idea, I said, hey, this is going to be perfect. So again, just to highlight the issue, it's going to be, right now, everything is done on paper in bike shops. We want to turn that into a technology-delivered product. And our solution uses AWS. We decided to go with Django, and we're using Material for our design principle, or design framework.
So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the infrastructure, what Ben was hinting at. So we started out thinking we're going to go AWS serverless, we're going to go Lambda functions, the whole 9 yards. What better way to learn than a Capstone project? And then as we were like looking at the project more, and we had big dreams scope-wise, and we were like, this is a terrible idea. We don't know what we're doing. It sounds really flashy, but we're not going to be able to accomplish a lot of the things that we hope to with the product. So like day 1, we pivoted. So we decided to go with Django and Python because it's a framework that we're all familiar with, we all have good experience with. Obviously still using Material like Ben mentioned, and tons of other AWS products, S3, SES, RDS, Beanstalk, all the other great buzzwords. And we got great stuff going with code build and code pipelines, so we have continuous integration and deployment set up, which we were super pumped about. And we played around with another awesome tool that AWS has called Cloud9. It's a company they acquired. It's an in-browser IDE on a shared server, so we can all do our development, see real time what other people are doing, and see how it looks without having to push up risky commits to the cloud.
So yeah, let's jump into this. So essentially, what we wanted to do is build a platform for customers to have an easy process for buying and using a repair. So let's jump in. This is Mad Dog Cycle's website. So our idea is to be able to integrate as a SaaS product with their current website. So what we would have is essentially a button where you can come here, click on their service, and then it shoots back over to our actual our product. So this is our Service Spoke website. It's currently live. So anyone that wants to go out there, that's
just wait till I'm presenting
in
in case we break something or you.
So basically, we have a customer dashboard or customer portal where they can look at their profile information. We're not going to go through the login process unless we're not logged in, which we are. So cool. So essentially, what they can do is they can come edit their profile info. They can just update that information. We don't require that on logging in, but something that we could talk about. But let's request a repair. So as a kind of caveat or what we want to present, our distinction for each of these different product types is based upon what Mad Dog Cycle has determined in their service repair shop. So if it's kind of confusing that, wait, there's like, what about my classic classic beach cruiser or hybrid bike? This is all classification through Mad Dog Cycle, and we set up our models to adapt to different bike shops as well. So this isn't built solely around Mad Dog Cycle. Okay, so I'm into road biking, so we're gonna click a road bike. Here, let's pick a service package where we can pick gold, silver, bronze. I'm feeling feisty, so let's go with this gold $120 option. Let's come check out the cart. Here is where you could, if you wanted, say, hey, it turns out I don't necessarily want this, remove it from the cart, just the same as any other cart option. The functionality here is that based upon when it's convenient for you to drop out, our idea is that we will be able to estimate how many days in the future based upon our backlog to be able to determine the estimated pickup date for them. So we'll come here and
so it has like a standard, it's normally going to be about a 5-day thing, but we're kind of running 2 days behind, so we can factor that in.
Exactly.
Yep, exactly. So here's our order. I should be receiving an email here.
It's my account, so I'll receive it.
Alex just received an email regarding his order. I'm not gonna, just for time's sake, to pull it up. It's essentially just a link to their order here. We'll go back. Here's our orders currently. Looks like I just placed it today. Let's come back to the customer dashboard. So again, we're trying to make this as fluid and as seamless as possible. We've gone through a couple iterations of user testing. We've gotten so much great feedback, and we're like, this is awesome. We want to make those changes, and we were able to implement some of those here. As far as the customer, again, if there's anything in the cart, you could go to the cart and check that out. If you're like, hey, I want to actually go look at my bike, make sure I'm not missing anything there. Cool, I think that wraps up the user portion.
How does the user know what's included in the gold package?
There was a description on the bottom. I should have highlighted that better.
It has a little bit of dummy data right now, but you can put in all kinds of details, and it's directly linked to the a la carte items. So, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's something as we work with the customer more to nail down what they have in their packages specifically. We just know that they have a gold, silver, and bronze
And we pulled in their like descriptions from their website as well, so.
All right, I'm going to talk about the service tech stuff. So we're really in the bike shop. So Randy is my buddy who owns it. He bought it about 20 years ago. They really just train their service techs, and the guys just know what to do. So there's really not any checklists. You know, at first there might be, but the guys just kind of know, saying, hey, this is just like Ben said, they've got a thing taped to the bike, and it's like, hey, here's what we need to go through and do, and they just know. But the you know, most of the guys that are there, they're not super techy, but they just love biking. They love working on bikes. They love doing that stuff, and so we need to make something that was easy. And when we went through and did our mock-ups, I actually met and went through that with Randy and kind of showed him kind of our idea of, you know, wouldn't it be great to kind of, you know, time each section and go through and do all these different things. And he's like, you know what, we just didn't make it as easy as possible, because on some of this stuff it just needs to be, you know, just where they can kind of get in and be really efficient. So, so what I'm going to show you is kind of what the service tech section is going to be. So there's really kind of, you know, 4 areas really that the service tech is going to have. There's going to be a check-in process, a register, a bike, you know, working on the actual product. So on the check-in process, we can see there's Ben's order right here. So as we went through these models, it was really interesting because there's this whole process where it's not like a shopping cart, right? Where it is, but it isn't. So you have a shopping cart, but then we're actually attaching that order to a physical object we've got to kind of keep track of. So then you've got owner history and you know, service and all that kind of stuff that happens on there. So we're going to go ahead and give this name. So, and let's see here. Let's see, this is a Trek. Give it some serial number, 2017. And so what we envisioned here was that, you know, in the check-in, do you know which one it was? Did you go to downloads? No.
That's what I get for doing it right before. I'll upload a picture of GitHub.
Oh yeah. Every bike lover's dream.
And what we envisioned was in the checkout, or in the check-in, there's usually kind of like a computer that's right there. They got a USB camera. As the person just brings it in, they would just.
There's an old logo for an old website I made.
There you go. We'll just
It's
pretend
gonna be our new bike.
We're just pretend that this is the picture of the bike. To go ahead and save. Yeah.
It's probably gonna be distorted, but.
So.
Oh, it looks nice.
So it looks good. So we've got that one. Check it in. Obviously, Ben just ordered a nice fancy package. If you need to make any notes, we can make notes. And then the work order section is kind of where the service tech actually goes and makes all of their all of the changes or keeps track of all of the things that they're doing for this service order. So here's Ben's chopper. We're going to start work on this one. And so what we did on this one is we decided to make it really easy. So as they click on begin work, that actually using Ajax goes and flags the database saying, hey, I just began this task. So service tech can just go through and just do the clean. Usually on this, they don't have to take a picture. They can. They need to make notes. They can kind of just go through and say, hey, task is completed. We've made it so as they go through and do this, every time they begin a task and end a task, it's keeping track of time. And then all we have to do is go through and just do the delta on those. And go through, make a note here. Might replace in future. Oh, that's nice. Anyway.
That might look like it.
That's all good. The other thing we had to kind of keep in mind is these guys are getting pulled off and on all the time during the day. So they might start a service order or work order and then get pulled away.
So we had to make it so they could kind of come in and see that, oh, these tasks are done. This one might have been started. You know, they can kind of get back in there and see, oh, this has been started, but it hasn't been actually been finished. So the other thing we did that we thought would be fun, do we have a connector for this?
No.
I've got, my bad.
So while you're walking,
Yep.
you're not actually capturing the amount of time spent on the task necessarily in case they are called away and it, you know, it looks like, oh, you spent an hour and a half on this. No, you spent 5 minutes and then you were something
Mm-hmm.
else for
Yeah.
the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there much hourly billing or are most of these charges just, we kind of bill the labor cost into the parts and whatever?
Yeah, I think they just build the labor cost into the part and stuff. Upon talking more with Randy and how they operate, it seems like the service techs, for the most part, are pretty separate from those that might be doing check-in or things like that. So hopefully there wouldn't be too much weirdness with like, oh, you actually only spent 5 minutes, but you're pulled away for an hour. But we do take that into account if it were to be an issue. And all of these kind of steps are something that we would set up with the business right upon installing, like, oh, when you have this item, these are the service checklist items you're gonna have to go through.
But for like, so the standard gold package,
Yeah.
we kind of know these are the items and we go through it, but if it was some repair and you have to
Yeah.
kind of figure
A
out what the
specific
problem
repair.
is and you don't know how long it's gonna take, that's a different
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
type of thing.
For sure. And I think one of the major benefits that we see is that there's also this like cost accounting as well. Essentially, if they were currently charging $120 for a gold package, and we're able to log how much time it's actually taking to do that, we can, the manager can go back and be like, well, we're taking way more time on this gold package than what we're actually charging, and up to this point, they have no idea how to log it or track that time as it is. So I think that's an important feature as well.
Anyway, so this is I grabbed this for, sorry. We just made it so we can take a picture of ribbon. So use that photo.
No way to do that.
Upload this. So this is one where I'm still working on this. This is why it's in dev. Is because, and I'm an idiot. I've spent countless hours on this, trying to figure out how to make this so my form uses Ajax to go and upload, so I don't have to reload the freaking page. But anyway, that's just me. So anyway, that way they can go through and take images of each different section if they want to go through and do that kind of thing. But really, I think for this one, getting those images and kind of keeping track of the time is really kind of the sweet spot for this. So.
Yeah, our vision is that the technicians would really have an iPad, and that's what they would be used to going through each of those different tasks. And so at the end of finishing a task or taking a picture, they could take a picture of like, hey, this is the working chain, we placed it, or things like that, where you could take pictures and show that the customer is satisfied with what's going on.
All right.
Get a good OtterBox case or whatever, and then that.
Yep.
iPhone's just around the shop.
A little
always.
strap on the back or something.
I'm just gonna go through and quickly finish up Ben's bike here.
I know, that's the problem with the gold package, is that there's so many steps, and so you can't complete the order until all the steps are done.
Yeah. Okay, so in fact that's the one thing. So yeah, so if the service tech says, "Oh, I'm done with this. I'm sick of working on it," it gives them and says, "Hey, you're not all done. You got to finish this up."
Gotta keep them.
What if there were extra parts needed for some reason that turns out your tire's junk? You need it.
Yeah, those are things. That's kind of like the next phase of where we're like, "Hey, you know what? We have a little flag in here for notify customers." So it's like, yeah, your derailleur is just trash. We've got to get a new one. Take a video of that or picture and then send that to them is kind of like a next step, kind of where we want to go with that.
Or put that in the notes, and then when they come pick up their bike, be like, hey, so I don't feel comfortable giving your bike back yet, but we want to verify that you're okay with this.
So the other thing, so we finished up Ben's work order. So he's now been emailed, so he comes in, so he says, great, I'm here to pick it up, picks it up, great, and he's done. So that's the service tech section. There's still a lot to be done in this part. A lot of things that we can kind of go through and do, but that just kind of gives you a flavor of what there is in this portion. So, any questions on the service tech stuff before we the next one?
And then here, the last use case that we had thought about was a manager. This one we didn't spend hardly any time on, just as like a proof of concept. So the manager kind of wants insights on what's going on in the business. How long are these things taking? How many orders do we have? Stuff like that. Something that they can't really keep track of right now with just carbon copy and counting the bikes around the office, maybe. So if they come into the manager, they could portal, they can edit the services that they have, change the pricing, change the descriptions, things like that. And see what customers they have, what technicians they have on staff. They give you the status and see, you know, we can build out a nice pretty dashboard for them to see, oh look, this is how long services are taking. This is how many you have in the shop right now, ready for pickup, things like that.
We've got a good infrastructure for a lot of data analysis for the manager that we just weren't able to flesh out in the semester, but the stuff is there.
Yeah, this was like, manager stuff was like on our fringe. Maybe we'll get to it if we have time, so we got a little taste of it. But we wanted to move on to lessons learned. So we learned a lot of things as a group. The three of us aren't developers at heart. We have like a little bit of experience. We probably have like collectively as much experience as like, I don't know, any of the last group had like when they got to the junior corps. So it was really interesting for us to do a full project start to finish as a group instead of just like, oh, we're doing this week-long project in a class or something like that. The first thing that we were looking at was planning. Having a vision of what the product could be is not the same as having it planned and what you're going to work on at different times. We learned that one like 4 different times. Division of tasks. So we spent some time dividing, no, I'm going to do front end, you're going to do back end, you're going to do database, stuff like that. We spent other times seeing if it would work better, if we were saying, okay, well, you work on this service tech kind of portion, different use cases. And we realized going into that talking and communicating was the most important thing. When we started to siphon ourselves off, we were bad at communicating. We weren't keeping each other updated. And once we changed that, the progress that we were making like multiplied by a bajillion. That's the formal word for by a bajillion. So, and then big picture versus little picture, balancing that out. You want the little picture, you want to focus on certain details and making sure stuff looks good, but keeping the big picture product in mind. If you lose yourself in the weeds, in a specific set of weeds, you're going to miss the whole point. Simplifying when it comes to like how we set up our database or how we're setting up certain navigation. The more complicated we made it at the start, the harder we made it on ourselves to work with, and ended up having to go and redo stuff. Again, we're not developers, right? But we learned a ton. And then the last one is a piece of advice that our alumni mentor gave us. Done is better than perfect. He gave it to us pretty early on in the process, and it just like resonated through us super hard. It's better to have it there than have like each, I don't know, individual minute detail there. We want it to be functional. We want to have something out there so we can test it, so we can get feedback. Done is better than perfect. That's a good lesson we learned.
I have it on vinyl in my family room now.
I'm thinking about it.
Cool. Do you want to take next steps?
No, I talked enough. What do you want to? So next steps. So a couple of things. We actually met with Trek and talked about their point of sale. They are very focused on their own retail stores. They have no open API. They have no interest in opening it up for other parties. We also learned in the middle of our project that there are actually 2 very well-funded companies that are already doing this type of thing for bike shops. Mainly focused on bike shop rentals and for bikes and bike services. And they're funded very, very well. So between bike and this another retailer, control about 65 to 70% of all the point of sale systems that are used in bike shops. So that was one where, like, you know, well, as far as this going anywhere, that may be an issue for us, but who knows? But we know that there's definitely things that we could do, you know, with the service side and the manager portion. We looked at some things as far as testing, actually having Randy and his team go through and test and and kind of get some feedback on that. What else? What am I forgetting?
No, I think that was, you almost said something. No, I think that was perfect.
So yeah, but it was actually a really fun project. For me, I can say one of the lessons that I learned was just how easy the scope creep can just get out of proportion. And really what ends up happening is you just find all these different use cases where it's like, oh, it's gonna be super simple. These guys are gonna have a checklist of things, it's just gonna be checkboxes. And it's like, well, what if they leave in the middle? It's like, what happens if somebody else comes in? What happens about this? And so we had to think through all that. And it was a lot of process to go through and make those things happen. So it was good.
Yeah, ultimately, I think just wrapping up before that is that our scope was big, and I feel like we also met our scope. And push comes to shove, you're not going to get everything you want done, and scope creep happens. But I think ultimately we did fantastic as a group. So
we're gonna have Misha and Greg and Ashton finish it up for us.
Probably take them a week.
Questions?
So as far as like selling and going forward, are you guys just focusing on your one bike shop, or is the app set up to, maybe be sold to other bike shops? Would you have to sell them like different instances of Service Spoke, or could they get all on the same system together?
It's a great question. I'm gonna feel that one. So in talking with Randy, so they have a couple of other systems, right? What they really need is something that ties in to their point of sale. They don't want to have one more system that they're managing things in a separate thing. So for him, using something like this isn't probably viable. For other bike shops, it probably is. What we tried to do is make the infrastructure kind of sterile, so we could use it for anything. So it could be used for a small mechanic doing stuff for like lawnmowers or trimmers or iPhone repair. Yeah. So whatever infrastructure we built could be easily used and pivoted for that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, we planned it that way, right? We were like, well, we don't want to only build something for non-dog cycle, and so we made it pretty universal.
Which is interesting because doing that, you kind of miss a few things for the bike shop. When I was talking with Randy, there's a couple of steps where they actually want to measure, when they're adjusting the, I think it's the B tension. I'm not a bike guy. So there's like an actual figure that they want to have the service tech actually write down what they did on that one. So they can go back and say, hey, this is where you were at when we started, and this is where we came in. And so the way we developed it was kind of just, hey, just some notes, but being able to add a couple of things like that might not be too difficult. Good question.
So you had lots of buttons on your menu, like lots. What percentage of those are implemented or functionality?
Which menu, sorry?
Yeah, go ahead and just pull up the side again.
Along the left side.
Oh, on that left bar? Oh, okay, yeah. So this is split up by use case. So right now I'm logged in and I'm a manager. Thank you. So I have all of them. So all of these are implemented. All these just kind of are the same links that go to a dashboard. So if it's a tech that's logged in, they're not going to see this. They're not going to see the customer. If it's a customer that's logged in, they're only going to see that.
We're just super users.
So
but yes, all those are
lots of functionality.
Yeah, all those are there.
Okay.
We just thought we'd overwhelm you. So.
Anything else? All right. Great job. Okay. Up next, Cyber Tower Defense. Susie and Clip. Thank you. Appreciate it, Gil. Good morning, Reed.
Bonnie. Hello. Taylor, how are you sounding today?
Better. Yeah. Not great.
You
but
sound great.
So attention is. Oh.
You sent me?
You got the emails that I sent.
I have, yes, not the ones today, yesterday, are those the ones you're talking about?
I sent one this morning.
Okay, I did get one this morning.
And then
The
I sent,
USAA one
yeah,
is the
and
one
then I
this
sent the
morning.
one last night.
Yeah.
Getting the numbers.
Going to do the USAA one right after this.
Okay, so are you in?
Any questions around kind of format and that sort of thing? I've seen enough.
Am I gonna be near your office? Yeah.
Okay. Next up, we have Cyber Tower Defense. We turn the time over to Clint and Susie.
So yeah, our project is Cyber Tower Defense. So for our project, we want to think about how in the last 5 years, there's been a large increase in the number of data breaches of customers' personal information, employees' information. But even more concerning is the fact that there'll be 3.5 million jobs unfilled by 2021. So to address this concern, we wanted to focus our project on the issues around cybersecurity education and be able to make more materials for it. Some of the issues that we thought about was when we were thinking about what we wanted to do was how cybersecurity education a lot of the times will focus on how do you hack into a machine or just basic learning about the concepts of cybersecurity, but they don't very often give you hands-on experience mitigating some of the threats. And then we also were working with Dr. Wells and his 414 class and wanted to be able to provide some more cybersecurity focused labs for that course since BYU's been moving their cybersecurity focus earlier into the junior core. So for our solution, we have 2 vulnerable Ubuntu Linux VMs, and on those VMs are, we will provide students with written scenarios that kind of describe the background of what they need to do and what specific things are needed to secure the machine. And along with those, there are 5 labs focused on web and host-based vulnerabilities. And then the majority of our time we spent on was these lab scripts, grading scripts, and these are Python scripts that will automatically check students, check the VMs, and check that the necessary things that we fix. And then there's also lab setup documentation for professors.
Alright, so to kind of dive into the content of these labs, as far as the web application vulnerabilities, we focused on SQL injection and cross-site scripting. And these 2 vulnerabilities have been in OWASP's top 10 since the first edition in 2004. So it's still, 15 years later, it's still a huge vulnerability, and students not only need to know about these vulnerabilities, but how to secure them. And then as far as the Linux host configurations, we dive into a few hot topics that we feel like the students need to be aware of with Linux machines, as well as how to set up the configuration securely. So we have insecure service clients, just outdated services that just simply need to be uninstalled and removed from the machines. We have user and password management. Do users have access to the right groups? Do they have too much access? Or do we have too many users? Do we have not enough users? And we have SSH server configurations. Do we have the right timeout? Does inactive SSH session, is it terminated? As well as SMB secure configurations. Are we sharing our SMB shares securely? And so now we've already implemented the, we'll go back. So we already implemented the first half with the Node.js web application in the IS414 section just a couple weeks ago. And we got some of the students' feedbacks of how they liked it. They said it was extremely clear. They liked seeing their code in action. They both saw the vulnerable version, and then they went and secured it, and then they saw how web app responded after making the code changes. It gave them a clearer understanding. The auto grader was a good feature, and they'd love to see more examples of this. So now we'll dive into the demo. And so this first, so we give the students some documentation. Oh, interesting. Sorry about that. So we give the students a scenario. We designed the labs to kind of be up to the professor's discretion if they want to just give a kind of a, hey, this is the problem, go fix it, and kind of more go learn yourself. Or we also created walkthroughs where we both give them, hey, this is the problem and this is how you fix it, follow along, more type. So this web application, the problem that the students are given is their company they're working for is getting ready to deploy a web application, but as part of their procedures, that web application goes through a security test before deployment, and it just got back saying that it failed these 2 vulnerabilities, and they received an email from their boss saying, hey, this is the information you need to know in order to go fix it, and submit it again to the security team through the auto grader. And so let's actually look at these web applications. So this is the web application VM in its vulnerable state. So the student will be able to log in here. And for demo purposes, I have a lot of this already preloaded, but the lab will walk them through. They can look at the database, they can see what data the web application has, and they can also go through this user search. This is the web page that's vulnerable to SQL injection. They can see the intended functionality is simply look up the login ID and find out the name of that user that's associated to. However, like mentioned before, this is vulnerable to SQL injection. So if they enter this malicious query, it will pull up the user's hash. And so in order to fix this, the vulnerability is there's a hard-coded SQL query in the code, and they'll need to go and change that to be a find function that's used within the Node.js application that will parameterize the user input. And so for this products page, it is vulnerable to cross-site scripting. The intended user, the student will be able to see, okay, there's the intended functionality. However, when entered script, it will execute that script. And so the student will be able to walk through and fix that. And then they will also be given they'll be given an auto grader where they can test it, and it will give them feedback. So this auto grader, it has 3 difficulties. The first 2 provide more feedback, and they are password protected, just in case if the professor wants to use it more as an exam, they'll be forced to use the harder difficulty, which just automatically submits it with no feedback. So this first difficulty is easy. We'll just go ahead and demonstrate that because it provides the most feedback. It gives feedback as well as hints of how to secure it. So we'll enter difficulty 1. We'll enable easy. And then we'll say, let's create all 3 of those, or all 2 of those. And then it gives feedback directly saying, hey, you failed this. Here's the hints of how to do it. And then if they're given the option to submit it or not, which we failed at right now, so we're not gonna submit that. And now we have a, let's see if it's good on the right. Now we have a secure version of this VM we've already gone through and fixed it. And so now, say the student went and made the changes that were necessary, they'll be able to run this script again, run easily. Oops. And if they mistype it, perfect. It will kick them back to the main menu. Let's grade both of those again, and then we'll see that it passes. And then now that we pass, we'll say, yes, we do want to submit it. I'll enter my full name and the email address that I would like to send it to. Make sure that I didn't mistype that, because it will definitely not get to where it needs to go if I don't enter the right email address. And so now,
So what credentials are you using to send those emails?
so it's a default designated email for Gmail account. We set up a Gmail account that the code has it embedded, and we also.
Are you worried about that being distributed?
We compiled the code.
Okay.
And we also did the bit. We encoded it and then compiled the code.
Okay.
But we also wrote in our professor setup documentation,
How
give
to
them
change.
directions on how they can change
Yeah.
that to whatever account they want
Perfect.
it to be.
Love it.
Yeah. And now we can see we have one new email, which I send it to the email address that it's coming from, so it just reports it's coming from itself. And then the professor will be able to see that the student passed that. And now, Susie is going to walk through the host VM.
Okay, so for this one, we also wanted to keep in mind some of the articles that we saw at the beginning, how a lot of them, right, a big topic is SQL injection and cross-site scripting, but another hot topics includes SSH, SMB, as well as user and account management. So that's what we wanted to focus on. And so also in this host, so they'll be given a vulnerable version of the host. For the professor, we've also included scripts so that they can quickly switch between the vulnerable state and the secure state of the machines. And so first, students would be given the scenario for this. So in this scenario for the host, the kind of the background story is that your company has found a rogue Linux machine that they find out that isn't malicious, but it's just a group of employees that have set up their own machine. However, it's against policy for users to be able to have a machine that isn't under the ownership of IT. So the company has addressed that this server is still needed, but they're going to have to make sure that it's up to their security policies before it can go back online. And it's your job to make sure that you secure it. So then if we go a little bit down, we give students a list of some of the policies that they're going to have to fix. We base these on the CIS Center, the Center for Internet Security benchmark document for Ubuntu Linux machines of their suggested practices for setting up a Linux machine. And it includes insecure service clients, user and password management, so password complexity rules, password expirations, as well as we'll provide them with a list of users that should be added to the system in their correct groups. And then also things about SSH, how root login shouldn't be allowed, banner page, and then SMB shares, making sure that the shares are not anonymous and that the correct managers are added to those groups. So then going back to the VM. So in this case, students, after, assuming after they've fixed the vulnerabilities, or if they're using easier mode and they want to be able to see the hints, they can click the easy mode again. And then it gives them the option once again to click whether or not they want to grade the labs individually or grade all at once. We wanted to make sure that we emphasize this customizable aspect of it for professors, so that if there's one topic that they want to cover over other ones, they can either just choose to do that specific topic, or if they want to go ahead and do all of them, that they're able to do so. So we're going to click that we want to grade all of them, and then we start getting back feedback. Password. So over here we can see that this is the vulnerable version of the machine. But if we scroll up a little bit, we can see that first the insecure service clients is going to check for known depreciated or insecure applications that either don't encode their encrypt information set sent across the network, such as NIS, RSH, TOC, and Telnet, which are common ones that students should be aware of in case they come into an organization where there's maybe some legacy systems and they need to make sure that these aren't installed. Next, it will look at user and password management type ideas. So identity and access management is such a huge topic for cybersecurity related professions, and so we wanted to at least give some sort of intro into this. And so they'll check that the correct users are added to the correct groups, and then it will check for certain password complexity rules based on what was in the scenario, as well as that passwords expire after 90 days and that they lock out after a certain number of unsuccessful attempts. And for the last two, we have SSH server configuration. We want to make sure that students follow guidelines about root logins, and then about keeping the SSH client open so it will close out after a certain amount of time, as well as SMB secure configurations for the SMB shares. So kind of to highlight the biggest things that we learned through this whole project is we got a lot of experience with Node.js, Python, and Bash scripting. We had very little experience with Node.js, and we also wanted to focus on Linux machines because we found that we didn't get much exposure to that in our education, so we wanted to emphasize that, as well as the securing the web vulnerabilities. I've taken the IT penetration testing course, and that's a great course because you get to hack into the machines, but it doesn't really touch on now go in and actually fix it. And so learning about what are some of the ways to be able to go in and actually fix these vulnerabilities was something that we got to learn as we made these labs.
And the last two bullets, we also learned the value of iterative feedback, not just at the end of the project. Both last semester as well as this semester, we've worked closely with Dr. Wells, as well as meeting with our alumni mentor. As we've met consecutive times, we've been able to refine the product in its making. Not only, hey, this is what we did, oh, you hate it. And then we also learned the value of a good breakdown, or breakdown estimates come with experience. We definitely, this was kind of our first real experience of, hey, let's create this and let's actually go and do the work. And we definitely learned that we just kind of were going with it, and it didn't really provide much value in our estimates at the beginning. But Are there any questions?
So did the students do all of these
So
exercises,
they
or
did the web ones.
Okay.
So
Yep.
the
Yep.
the host configurations we didn't finish until like last week. So they just have done the web ones.
I can totally catch the vision of this and the benefit to the students. I think it's awesome. Just going to throw something out, and maybe it's as much for Dr. Wells as you all, but I wonder if we couldn't get, and I'd like your feedback on this, if we couldn't get students that are enrolled in 531 and 560 to add to the project, just a little module or something as an assignment in each of those courses with the bash scripting, with the things they're learning about additional vulnerabilities and creating things such that this is maintained over time. Any reaction to that?
Yeah,
Being a student, having gone through 531 and 560?
That would be awesome. So we've specifically tried to make it in a way that you could easily add on more and more, because we did as many as we could, but the overwhelming feedback from even just the students that did the web vulnerabilities is we'd like to see more.
Yeah.
So that would be great.
I think it was their favorite lab.
Yeah.
They did 8 labs, and kid told me it's their favorite.
Yeah. Nice. Other questions?
Yeah. Are you gonna make this? Are you thinking about making it open source so that other universities can grab it? There's people who are interested, or is it?
Yeah. So we publicly post it out on GitHub. So our intention is, anyone that wants to use it, go ahead and use it. So not just exclusive.
So I had kind of a similar thought. I do some cybersecurity work with the Department of Homeland Security, and they're looking at labs or ways to teach some of their students, primarily in software testing and evaluation, how to get labs to help them learn some of these principles. Would you be okay if I pass that on to them as a potential possibility?
Yeah, for sure.
Other thoughts? Questions?
I'm curious, in your internships and the work that you intend to do and that sort of thing, do you see any comparisons into what you put in play? I mean, you talked about, this is the most prevalent or the most persistent vulnerability, those sorts of things, packages that you may have used, or things that they had you do while you were out there?
Well, for me, I got first introduced to Node.js web applications specifically during my internship, and they worked closely with the QA teams to make sure that it passed a bunch of tests before it's able to go out, and so that's one of the reasons why we incorporated it.
Yeah, definitely. And my internship, definitely where I more or less learned my love for Linux, and we did strictly Linux, and I feel like that's one thing that students, especially students going into a security role, would really value from getting more hands-on Linux experience.
All right, thanks so much. Okay, we have just a couple minutes, but then we'll have the AR tagging group, Victoria and Garrison. Ooh, new record, 9 watching. New record for this year.
You did a little stand-up in between.
Hey,
That might increase your viewers.
I'm afraid I might drive them away. So John, you're on. Let's go. Thank you.
You want to give them minutes, or should we go?
Yeah, let's give just a couple minutes in case someone's purposefully coming at that time.
Alright, I'm gonna sit up.
Yeah, please,
Yeah,
please.
sure. Was there a clicker that's the last group taken?
I don't think there's a default clicker for the.
Yeah, because there's not a podium.
Gotcha.
computer.
Well, some have it, some don't. So Nah, not a big deal.
It's okay.
We can make do. Most of our presentation's gonna be at a demo anyway, so.
Though I learned about a new type of clicker that does a spotlight. Have you seen that one?
No.
No.
Where it like dims the screen and then where you're pointing it like spotlights and then zooms a little bit.
Wow.
I've seen it too.
What-
That's cool.
what-
Yeah.
What is this?
It's like $80 or something. I forget the
Oh.
name. I'll look it up. But you look
Oh,
like
it's something that
spotlight.
works on.
Yes, and you click it, the car that you want.
Wow.
Yes, general.
So
Spotlight
how
clicker.
is it that it?
I don't know the technology behind it, but it like dims except for where you're pointing, and then it zooms where you're pointing.
Is it
I'm
like-
totally getting one
Is
of
it a
those.
smart board on the back, or is it just a normal
No.
projector?
No, it's just, you can use it in any room.
But it must be like the presentation like must have some sort of. It must be some sort of.
I haven't tried it. I
special.
just witnessed it about a week ago at the NBA when they were presenting their final
Wow.
projects.
So is this something that's like software on the specific computer?
I think there might be.
Yeah,
that's what I was
okay.
trying to say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you can use it with PowerPoint and Keynote and whatever, so it's not
Yeah.
as picky about it.
I'm totally getting one of those. Is that appropriate to buy with their 20 funds?
Oh, by Logitech. Or do you say Logitech?
Logitech is what I say.
Yeah, so Logitech Spotlight presentation remote.
I've had my little Logitech clicker for a long time. I love it, but not as fancy as that.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, so
Maybe
often
the
it's so
department needs
hard
to buy
say.
one first of all, just to make sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually very, very cool in the presentation.
Just curious how
So-
the software knows where to
It must have like a little camera and looking at kind of the color distribution and matching.
I mean, it's like that.
Wow.
Spotlight is it. But usually kind of dims as well, the non-spotlight part. Better than the red dot.
Yeah. Mine's got the green dot, and I always love that part.
You know, 2 years
Huh.
ago, I remember I bought a laser pointer because it was so bad back in the 201 in the big auditorium.
Oh yeah, that's rough.
I got the cable.
I distinctly remember Marshall handed me his stack of overhead to when he passed off 414.
Yeah.
I was like, thanks. I'm gonna be making that into PowerPoint. The lab, I haven't seen half of that presentation, but half that we implemented in 2014. It's the only lab that students said they wanted more.
Hmm.
It was well received.
Yeah. I do like the suggestions that come with the auto grader, and gives enough direction that they can walk through. And
Still like, there was an original vision for that project that sort of got cut over time.
Yeah.
And this was fine, but
Yeah.
I still like some of the original vision too. But
Yeah.
I think the details are probably more important than the fluff,
Yeah.
the fluff afterwards. Might change again over time.
Huh. I'm totally intrigued. I'm gonna figure out how this thing works. Okay. I think we're probably close enough now that we can get started. Let's do it. So, thanks, Victoria and Garrison. The floor is yours.
Sweet. Emptied out for us. This is kind of nice.
Well, you still have 6 online.
All right. So
7.
My name is Gary Snyder. This is Victoria Shimoto, and we are doing AR tagging. Well, thank you all for coming out and seeing what we're doing. So a quick overview of everything we're going to go over. So we're going to help everyone understand the problem. I know we've shown some of this, you guys have seen some of the presentations already, but we're going to reintroduce that problem. We're going to talk about our target personas, kind of validating that this project was even worthwhile. With that, we're going to lay out our full solution, kind of top to bottom from the technical stack to all the way leading into an actual demo. Talk about where we take this next, if we would continue moved on with it. Talk about what we've learned, and then open it up for a full-on Q&A here at the end. So let's go ahead and jump on. So the biggest problem here is, first of all, graffiti is illegal. Painting graffiti
It's a
causes
problem.
issue. Then to make it even worse, all of us are affected by this. We've all been walking down the street, we've seen some graffiti out there, and been like, I really do not like what I'm seeing here. Or we've gone, this area is beautiful, why did someone do this? So this app is supposed to be a solution for both parties. For people like me who walk down my local park and go, this isn't art, this is ruining my park. And for the young millennial who's going, I want to express myself everywhere. This app, we decided we'd make a solution so we could hide that in a virtual world, as well as let them be able to express themselves. Let's go ahead and go on the next step. So our big 3 groups then would be first, the techies. That's everybody in this room. We're all the techie nerds that love getting our hands on every new technology possible. This app is built for those kind of people who want to play with new areas, new versions of technology. The next is actual artists, and that's what they would call themselves. As they go and draw on different things, we want them to be able to have that same freedom, that same ability in this kind of world. And then Generation Z, that's the generation growing up here. That's grown up, but kind of in a virtual world. They've grown up with social media, they've grown up with the Internet of Things, that's all they've kind of known. And that is a huge market in and of itself to start jumping into and be involved with making applications for. So these are kind of our 3 big groups that we're targeting when we built and designed this app.
Okay, so our solution is a augmented reality graffiti or spray painting experience. And so a couple of the features in our spray painting experience is you can change colors, you can erase what you did, you can collaborate with other people, so 2 phones can be doing it together at the same time. Also, you can publish your art to the world, and so that other people can find it, and you can also either download it to your phone or share it through social media, through video or snapshot. So what technology we used is we use primarily Swift, Xcode, iOS. So we built this specifically just for iOS devices.
Android users.
Yeah, sorry Android people. And for our database where we save artwork, we're using Firebase. And also GeoFire, which helps pin our artwork to locations.
So I'm not familiar with GeoFire. Is that?
It's like an extension of Firebase.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like
tags location basically to that.
Yeah.
That data.
So, and it lets you like query by location.
Oh, yeah,
So,
kind of distance or proximity to that.
yeah.
Cool.
So that's what GeoFire is.
Nice.
All right, try to jump to the actual application.
Yes. And my husband made us this cool icon.
So we'll be able to demo quite a different, we're going to go through each feature one by one that we kind of talked about. We were really kind of proud of how we planned out our scope and everything, and we were able to successfully hit everything. It doesn't all work as nice as we would like, but everything we set out to do, we were able to do in this. So we'll walk through each of these features we mentioned already.
Right. Sorry, let me turn on my brightness for a second. Okay, so first things first is you have to have enough data points, and you see here it says not enough data points, so I gotta find a place that has enough.
Try out the chair.
share.
We've learned that reflective surfaces seem to have a lot more issues, and this room is very reflective, as we've been testing earlier today. And I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that affects it nearly as much until we actually started playing with it today.
What about just the carpet?
Let's see.
Yeah, or the
No.
or these mat chairs, yeah. Wonder.
We'll talk about this later.
Yeah.
This goes heavily into our lessons learned.
Because it's, yeah. Okay, let me try restarting it.
There we go. Oh, there it is.
There we go. Nope, there we go. Okay. See, it's very finicky. But hypothetically, you can draw something, you can change the color, and then you can also delete what you did. And then you can save the artwork to the world, so that's this top button. And you give it a name. Author. You can save it. Okay, now I'm gonna load it from the world.
Could you go back real quick, Victoria, just so they know where you clicked? So she clicked the world logo right there, and because it doesn't really give us that feedback, and then she clicked the little person beside the circle right there. So you guys can know where she's clicking.
So circle, and then you match it up, and there it is again. So, now.
Okay. So the next part is the multiplayer, and this has been the headache of my life for probably the last 3 weeks. Before I jump fully into showing this demo, I want to kind of talk about how this works a little bit. So augmented reality, as we all know, is kind of a brand new thing, especially bringing it to the mobile. And with that, we've discovered a lot of people cheat when they do augmented reality multiplayer. They drop a singular anchor or a location, and then they just pass that, and then both people control things that are on top of that anchor. Well, for our situation, every single thing you're seeing here is made up of lots of little dots, each having their own anchor. And then each line is made up of separate anchors on top. So we learned we have to actually send the full world map from one device to the other, and then each time someone draws a line, that world map has to be resent again, and then relocating, making sure the anchors not only are from the right place physically, but even spaced correctly from each other. Which created lots of interesting ways of how do we keep this going and doing it interactive experiences if you actually have real spray paint. So, Victoria, do you have enough? Can you get it to say ready again? So we have to get the data points to the point where it says ready again. You might have to restart it to make it work. I hope not. I'm gonna have her draw a line as soon as we can get.
We're gonna restart it.
Okay. She's gonna go ahead and draw a line, or do you want me to draw one and send it to you?
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. So she's gonna draw a line and send it to me real quick. Both are gonna have to get to that ready point.
And also, something to keep in mind is I have an iPhone XR.
Which makes a big difference.
And he has an iPhone 7?
iPhone 7, correct.
And so it actually makes a huge difference. Like,
She ends up being ready in a lot more places than I do. So we made it work all the way down the iPhone 7. Okay. Oh, I had it. There we go. So, here, I'm gonna send it to you. So right now you see that she has. Okay. Right now you see that she has a little pink thing, and I'm gonna send my world now to her. So, my really bad attempt at a smiley face is about to go over to her now. So you notice it just disappeared.
yeah, so my world gets overwritten by his world.
So as soon as she gets to that ready point that we were just trying to show, it will bring in those data points. So as we said, we can get this to work, but it's very temperamental versus a single little person usage.
Yeah, I'll just note to those that haven't seen the earlier demos, this environment is really challenging. You know, earlier in the semester showed several instances and it was almost instantaneous for kind of the recognition of the world and stuff.
I'm glad you saw that. So yes, it does not really work this temperamental. Of course, it's when we're demoing it.
Send it again.
Send it again. So this is a prime example of what we've been dealing with though, is trying to get that world to send correctly. Here, let me crash my intro again.
Or let me try send it to you. Can't get enough points.
As you saw though, it did remove her world
If
that
we
she had
dimmed the
mapped.
lights in here.
Yeah.
Makes for bad video, but for sure.
And that, or I'm wondering, you know, like a plant or something.
No, it actually, it needs more light. The more light, the better.
Okay.
Oh, there it goes. There it is. So
Look at that.
there she goes.
Oh.
So you can see that's the smiley face I just drew. The world came across.
But we're seeing it on her phone.
Yep. So I drew that from mine, and you're seeing on hers. Now let's see if we can keep both at
And
ready points.
If you, can I?
Yeah. You're gonna have to keep mine at a ready point at it.
Well, you can. Actually you can't. Cause anyways,
Fair.
we can both look at it from different perspectives at the same time.
So we're both looking at the same world entirely from the two. I know you can't see the one up there, but if anyone wants to, we can afterwards. We'll leave these both running.
Anyways,
Don't crash it, we'll just leave it running.
so moving on.
Well, you keep this connected. If anyone wants to come over afterwards, I can see how you can see it in full screen.
Moving on though. So then to be able to share it, you can either take a video. And you can upload it or save it to your phone. Or you can take just a photo.
Victoria, would you pull your camera down so that folks can see kind of the different angles or perspectives?
Yeah, white is a kind of hard color to see.
Other big thing to know is we were really trying to focus on flattening. You'll see other applications out there that they'll do up in the air space. We don't do that because we were trying to literally replicate more of a graffiti-like fill, and that also gave us harder locations to cook onto to help with anchors. So that was another thing. You'll see other applications that are semi-similar to ours, but they'll paint randomly in the air and whatnot. Those are actually easier to send because they just need to send the object across versus ours where we're actually saying flat location on a specific location.
Alright. So, lessons learned. AR is still developing. It's definitely not like very stable yet. Even ARKit itself. So ARKit is provided by Apple. Apple develops it. And it actually, every time you run it in Xcode, it gives you errors. Even if like your project is blank. Because there's errors inside ARKit itself. And that would be like outside of our scope to try to fix that.
Of course.
Lots of people would think us though.
And so like it's just very, very finicky. It's not, it has a hard time like recognizing surfaces sometimes, and
just saw.
Yeah. It has to have like good enough lighting. It has to have enough texture. It's just very picky.
And if you, as you notice too, as we've already brought up, just the different phones can cause very different experiences. They haven't many of us get into a stable enough state that they can say, okay, on this phone up, it's going to be stable. They can just say, it's going to work on this phone or above. It's not going to guarantee a good experience, but it will work. Which, that in and of itself, as you guys just witnessed, can cause major headaches. The next part is the multiplayer. I talked about this a little bit some more. When you see multiplayer augmented reality apps in the market, Apple's big one with ARKit in particular, they love to show off, is one where it shows this giant blocks that go across the table, and they use slingshots to shoot them at each other. When we saw this, we were like, why can't we replicate that same experience? And we did all this research and homework trying to figure out why. And what we discovered is they pass one singular anchor with one object and everything building off that object. Whereas
it's for them, it's turn-based. So that's what makes it so hard to like do it collaboratively at the same time. Just because right now, like the farthest they've gotten is turn-based.
And even when you go through and read the documentation on it, they talk about, okay, you want to have a host and a servant is what they call them. And this one's hosting the whole experience, where we're trying to make it a situation where we're both own complete ownership of it and do it. So we were able to get it to work, but not quite the way we wanted, and it was kind of an eye-opening experience to realize, as much as a lot of the companies have made it look like this technology so far, that especially in the multiplayer and collaborative world, we've got a long, long way to go.
Another couple things that we learned is GPS coordinates aren't super accurate with your phone. So when you save it to the map, it'll show how far it is from your current location. And so, like right now, that circle one I made earlier, it says I'm 2 meters away, or 3 meters away, which is
a little bit closer than that.
not quite 3 meters. And yeah, so that's something that we also learned, and also that we had originally wanted it to be that you would just open the app and you could see anybody's artwork that was already there. That is not possible yet, really. So our workaround was to create a list where you can just pick one and then match it up, like we saw before. Anyways,
with that too, when we tried the other one, it would just make the app crash half the time if we even tried, just as we talked about.
and that's also because AR is super memory and energy intensive. And so it'll crash a lot if you're not managing the memory efficiently.
So I would say overall, the massive lesson learned was we just jumped into it. It was really cool for us to jump into something we haven't really played with. We had all different classes throughout leading up to this point, and to apply it, but this was kind of a new ballpark for both of us in a lot of ways that we didn't expect. And getting our hands dirty, you could say, an AR kit was the heaviest lesson I think we learned overall, just how far it's still got to go and how big of a market it's still ready to be built and created.
So next steps, if we were to want to produce this, the next step would be to get it on the App Store and monetize it, probably through ads, and then just keep working on smoothing it out and stuff.
As you guys felt, a lot of those experiences, they work, but they're not quite smooth, fine-tuned, probably a little bit more user feedback to the user themselves as they're going through things. Lots of these would need a lot of that love and care if we wanted to continue on and getting that feedback would be so much straightforward.
So as far as this project goes, I don't think we're gonna take it much further, just because it's the technology's not quite there yet. I've had a couple ideas of similar apps that could be better, just to fit around the technology more. But as far as this goes, we learned a lot by doing it.
It set us up to go in other avenues. I honestly, if I ever tried to do multiplayer again, I'd probably use Unity, as they have their own internal engine for it. But it's, again, a faked one just like this is, and it was nice to get right into that. So we'd probably just take that knowledge and put it elsewhere, which is kind of sad to say, but it was a very wonderful learning experience.
But I think you're right. I think it's just so early on, and if you're trying to create the, framework inside their framework to do something that their framework doesn't do, man, that's an uphill slog.
Very much so. Any questions before we finish up?
So I had just a couple. So your interactivity model, you settled in on kind of a turn-based one, is that right? Where kind of take turns, and if let's say you sent one to Victoria and Victoria, you add to it, then do you send that back? So you're kind of transferring the JSON object back and forth between.
The first time you do it, you have to. Here, let me show you again. The first time, you have to click this collaboration icon.
It's the one that says the plus.
Top left, yeah.
Yeah.
That shares the world.
And that shares it initially.
Okay.
Then once we've connected, he'll draw a line, and it should automatically come to my phone.
We have noticed, so it's temperamental. there's times where it requires me to share the map back to her. It won't let me to continue to draw, but it does work to an extent of she can connect, draw, and I'll see all of
So
them.
once you're connected, then you can just take turns and it'll automatically populate that
It
the
should.
next
Yeah.
bit.
But as we said, it was very rigged because it is the turn-based model. But
Yeah.
rigged into the button.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
we've tried to make it feel more collaborative, but it is turn-based basically.
You know, over the weekend I was playing with the iPad Pro and the Apple Pencil a little bit, and some of the different brush strokes. I know you just said you're not going on, but you know, I think one thing that if you chose to go on would be some of the smoothing algorithms that are probably common in that environment also. Hand-drawn strokes to, you know, kind of smooth out things, and so I was very impressed, and each brush was a little bit different in how they did it, and I don't know the algorithms behind it, but make those smooth, you know, angles for the heart, for the smiley face, and other things where instead of individual points, you take that and then you apply the smoothing algorithm to it.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Is like the line itself is a bunch of like small
Individual dots, yeah.
super close together.
Yeah.
And we originally had problems with this because it wasn't rendering fast enough to like pick up your point of movement.
There'd be like holes inside the line.
Yeah, I remember.
And so I just wrote a function to
fill in the blank. Hey, that's
space
great.
between. So yeah.
Very good.
When you initially start, is ARKit doing all of the identification of the chair to say this is the object?
Yeah.
Is there a way to go through, so if you were to use it in a graffiti type way, you could say this is the cannon center and this is this wall or whatever, so it kind of just tags it almost like with a I guess a building ID or something like that. Is there a way of kind of tagging something with that to?
Well, I mean, there is like sort of ish. Like if you were to draw something and then nope, not that one, and then save it, you could get a title like.
One of the biggest
Tanner Building.
So right now.
West Side, I don't know.
There's individual dots that ARKit recognizes and creates the surface upon which you can apply the paint in this case. And so there's no real way of saying this is this wall of this room compared to this wall of this room.
So
it's just the individual dots
like
that distinguish it. So
move this chair and like different chair,
it would still work.
Still be there.
So when it first started out, we originally thought we'd start maybe like one room and try to geolocation and get it more specific that way. And we just realized, that's very limiting, because think of this building right now. It got up and down, and right now, the phones don't really do a good job of saying, you're on the 5th floor of this building. So to be able to get over that, we opened it up a little bit more, and it turned out it's what gave us more freedom than just a singular room. So.
well, it's
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, we did it. No, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
it's an aggressive project, and I've been impressed with what you've been able to do based on the limitations of the framework. So I think you've done a nice job in a really tough environment. This isn't just CRUD stuff, right?
No, a little bit more like create, update, read, delete.
Yeah, and you can we also did some cool features like opacity. So
So that's what happens if you notice she was drawing
so
before.
it looks funny when you do different opacity. What else? Yeah, that's about it. Was there any other questions?
Okay, great job, thanks. Okay, we have a break until 2, I believe now.
Yes.
Okay. All right, great job, folks.